Hi all, I've got another fantastic game of Vishvnathan Anand to show you, this time played in 2006 in the German Bundesliga League, which is the premier league of team chess in Germany and arguably the strongest and longest running league of its kind. It attracts many strong grandmasters from Europe and beyond. And Vishvnathan Anand was playing in 2006 and his opponent in this game was Polish grandmaster Bartłomiej Maciej. Well, I'll give you the spelling in the description. I think I've definitely got the pronunciation wrong. Apologies for that. But anyway, so let's see the game. So in this game, we see e4, and we see a rock solid Caro Cann, d4, d5, and now knight c3. This is like a mainline Caro Cann with now bishop f5, so the most solid, tried and tested move, bishop f5. The knight goes back, bishop g6, h4, and white's wrestling to win the bishop. Black usually now plays h6, which is what's played. Knight f3, knight d7. So black is accepting rather cramped quarters on the first three ranks. This is a typical Caro Cann position. Usually black will aim to strike later with perhaps c5 and have a very solid and usually quite robust position, difficult to penetrate. We see h5, bishop h7, and now bishop d3. This is all pretty standard stuff. Bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, e6. So black has got rid of that potentially bad bishop and now putting pawns solidly on these light squares. Bishop f4. And black's usual move here is to play queen a5 check. And white just usually retreats with bishop d2. And if you're wondering why this looks a bit odd, well, c3 is actually quite a bit rarer. c3, and black's kind of got what he wanted to kind of loosen this square a bit. Maybe later c5 is going to be a bit more effective with that looseness created. So usually actually the bishop drops back to d2, and in this game we see bishop b4, and now c3 is played, bishop e7, c4. Still very, very theoretical. And you might wonder, what happens if bishop b4, if black wants to be annoying? Well, that's okay. If bishop b4, and we'll put on a bitzer, white actually gets a very, very nice position. This is not normally played at all. White just can now play knight e4, threatening knight d6 check, and this is quite unpleasant already for black. For example, taking here, there's a big problem on d6. So no, the idea was just to provoke this c pawn, slightly loosen this square, this d3 square, and after this c3 here and c4 here, queen c7 was played, and now Vishy makes the game very, very exciting, castling queenside, knight g f6, and black often in the Caro Cann considers castling queenside here after rook d e1. Black is interested in actually using the queenside for quite a lot of aggression against the white's king. This next move is really, really aggressive and also has a positional basis to it too. b5. Now white really doesn't want to play c takes. I think this will leave black slightly better. So this position, knight d5, it's a very, very nice knight on d5, isolated queen's pawn. Black would be sitting quite comfortably here. Instead, Vishy chooses, I think, a lesser evil move in the position, c5. And although in one respect this seems to leave a backward pawn and also still give up the d5 square, it does cramp black's game quite a bit. And you might think also a later e5 would undermine these pawns, particularly that c5 pawn, to make it loose. For the moment, black castles. Now we see knight e2, and there's a very clear-cut idea behind this. First of all, it avoids any simplification with knight e4. On knight e4, I think black would have quite a solid game here. Say rook fd8, and there are already some issues like knight takes c5 with this pin on here, and this looks as though black's doing quite well. For example, like this, and then knight f6, and then there's nothing to speak of. This is a backward pawn. This is a great square for black. This would be very nice for black. No, knight e2 keeps the tension going in the position and prepares to batter down black's king simply. Very simple, aggressive idea, and we're going to see that in action here. With this positional concession, white has to go for it. White has to go for the king. He's actually theoretically positionally worse. That d5 square in this pawn chain is quite loose, and black gets to work on trying to blow up this pawn chain. The immediate e5 here, let's just consider the immediate e5 for a moment, might be answerable with a kind of weakness of the last move, that f5 is a bit looser. Knight g3, say taking, well, we can take here. So this is not too good. It's a bit embarrassing for black that white could just pounce here. So black, in preparation for this kind of break to undermine this chain, played rook fe8. Seems perfectly logical. So the bishop's not so loose. And now this very aggressive g4. White got to do this because white has conceded squares here. Okay, and if knight d5 now, although it looks like a nice blockade, black's king safety is compromised. With g5 already, this looks like a compromised king safety position. So black's got to be careful. If he takes on g4, this is very interesting. Rook hg1, give up the f pawn. Knight takes f2. And the queen, it seems the most accurate move for the queen here would be queen c2 to stop the knight using e4. And white's threatening now bishop takes h6. And if black plays king h8, then we can attack this knight, and it's a big advantage actually for white. For example, like this. And where is the knight going? If knight g5, this starts to get a bit horrible for black. hg, there's rook takes f7. On bishop takes g5, well, bishop takes, and then again rook takes f7. And this is very nasty for black. Nasty pin, h6 is on the cards, queen g6 is on the cards. So taking that pawn, yeah, it seems risky, and is risky rather concretely, that black cannot take this pawn, but he pursues this undermining of the pawn chain here with e5. So it looks totally like the right sort of punishment, and e4 is also threatened as well. So Vishy actually steps out of the way of the e4 threats by playing queen f5. And he's still pursuing g5 now. E takes d4, his centres collapse though. g5, he's got to go for the king. H takes g, and now bishop takes g5 is played, and it's a very, very interesting position dynamically here. Black tries in this position knight h7. The engine suggests actually something quite sneaky instead in this position, as though black might be okay, or even slightly better with knight e4. This is a very interesting idea. So of taking rook takes e7, it doesn't seem entirely that bad at the moment for black. This seems a plausible continuation. But it wasn't played. Instead we see knight h7, and now Vishy attacks the queen. Bishop f4, queen c8. Now takes time out to play knight e takes d4. Black now plays knight takes c5, so he's got rid of white's pawns totally, and is threatening the queen. The queen just drops back here, queen c2, and now there's actually a threat of rook takes e7 and queen takes c5. The bishop steps out of harm's way with bishop f8. Now we see rook eg1, and h6 is now on the cards. There's a great focal point on g6. Looks right for almost a sacrifice on g6 now. Black now is actually, with h6 being threatened and other things, black is in a precarious situation. Tries rook e4, seems very tempting. Let's gain a tempo here, but the bishop just now plays bishop to e5. White is now threatening bishop takes g7, followed by h6. That will be very painful indeed. Black parries this with f6, but now the deeper point of bishop e5 is now revealed. Vishy in this position plays an incredible move. I wonder if you can guess it. if I give you 10 seconds, you might want to pause the video. So 10 seconds starting from now. Okay, very aggressive move, h6, sacrificing the bishop. After f takes e5, h takes g7. Okay, let's first look at bishop takes g7. This wasn't played. Queen takes c5 is very dangerous. So if taking here, well, it's a very powerful move in this position, queen h5, and it's difficult to see what black does in this position. Say here, queen h8 check, knight g5. Black is just getting, actually it's a forced mate. The engine indicates this is a forced mate. Black's pieces are getting also scooped up. So very interesting, difficult position here. Bishop takes g7 seems to fail. Bishop e7 instead is played. And now Vichy, with this queen looking on this diagonal, just plays knight takes e5. So both knights cannot be taken because of this h7 knight. That'll be queen takes h7. Black tries bishop d6. Now Vichy just plays f4, which means actually queen h2 is now on the cards. So this rook, which is standing in an offensive role against h7, it doesn't really matter now. Queen h2 is now on the cards. Black tries bishop takes e5, and after f takes e5, black is actually helpless here to these numerous threats. Queen takes c5 or rook takes h7. These are really, really strong threats. Rook takes h7 in particular is a menace. The knight is holding the queen away from these squares, e6 and f5. What can black actually do here? He actually resigned. Let's look at some move alternatives to see why exactly he resigned. Well, where can the knight go? For example, knight f8, trying to give up the knight. We just play rook h8. This is the most incisive, which is queen here. That would be a total disaster. So the knight can't move. If knight e6, just rook takes h7 is crushing. So knight takes d4, queen takes e4, for example. Now threatening rook h8. It's hopeless for black. If queen f5, check, and actually in this position this will do, because we're queening the pawn. Doesn't even matter about the queen here. So that's crushing. It's just a totally crushing position, this final position here. There's nothing, it seems, black can do at all. Black's hopeless. King safety has been totally eroded. So this was really a king's crushing game, if I say so myself. It's just the way it was played by Vichy was with extreme aggression, castling on opposite sides, playing that c5 move, which I think a lot of players might find difficulty bringing out the true upsides of this. It seems as there's immediate downsides positionally, backward pawn prone to undermining the d5 square, but it gives white a little bit of extra time if black's going to castle kingside to strip open that g file, as we saw. Quite amazing stuff. Precision timing of the attack compensates for white losing both of these pawns. Just that g file is the crucial aspect of this position to get the attack going, and sacrificing a piece here adds more fuel to the fire much quicker, just sacrificing the bishop. And the rook's beautifully coordinated here, and after knight takes e5, the queen is joining in potentially after f4 and queen h2. A really beautiful aesthetic attacking game with black totally helpless in this final position. I hope you enjoyed this one. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.